Title: The Tangled Web of Betrayal. Part 1. The Betrayal, Chapter 1. The Bar Encounter. James sat alone at the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey. The golden liquid swirled in his glass, catching the dim light from the overhead fixtures. The bar, a cozy yet upscale place called the Velvet Lounge, was filled with soft jazz music and the quiet murmur of conversations. The atmosphere was intimate, with plush leather seats and dark wooden tables. A long mahogany bar stretched across one side of the room, lined with an impressive array of liquor bottles that glinted in the subdued lighting. It had been a long week at work, filled with back-to-back meetings and tight deadlines. With Evelyn away on a business trip, James felt an unusual sense of loneliness creeping in. He often found solace in her presence, her calm and supportive nature providing a balance to his hectic life. But tonight, the emptiness of their shared home had driven him out in search of distraction. As he took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes scanned the room. The bar was moderately busy, with small groups of people engaged in quiet conversations, couples leaning close to each other, and a few lone patrons like himself. His gaze landed on an attractive girl sitting a few stools down. She had long, dark hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders and wore a fitted black dress that accentuated her slender figure. She seemed engrossed in her thoughts, occasionally glancing around the room. James noticed her looking in his direction. Their eyes met, and she smiled, a warm, inviting smile that made him feel a spark of something he hadn't felt in a long time. He hesitated for a moment, then smiled back. The girl picked up her drink and gracefully slid over to the empty seat next to him. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice smooth and confident. "Not at all," James replied, returning her smile. "I'm James." "May," she said, extending her hand. They shook hands, and James felt an immediate connection. Her handshake was firm yet gentle, her skin soft and warm. Up close, he could see her eyes were a striking shade of green, filled with a lively spark. "So, James, what brings you here tonight?" May asked, taking a sip of her cocktail. James shrugged, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Just needed a break from work. It's been a long week." "I can relate," May said, nodding. "Sometimes you just need to unwind, right?" "Exactly," James agreed. "What about you? What brings you here?" May laughed softly, a melodious sound that made James' heart skip a beat. "Same reason, I suppose. It's been one of those weeks." They started talking, and as the night wore on, James found himself increasingly drawn to her. May was charming and witty, with a quick sense of humor that matched his own. They discovered they had a lot in common. Both loved classic literature, shared an interest in hiking, and had a similar taste in music. James was pleasantly surprised by how effortlessly the conversation flowed. "What's your favorite book?" James asked at one point, genuinely curious. May's eyes lit up. "That's a tough one, but if I had to choose, probably To Kill a Mockingbird. It's such a powerful story." James nodded in agreement. "A great choice. I love the themes of justice and morality. For me, it's The Great Gatsby. There's something about the tragic beauty of it all." They continued to exchange stories and opinions, finding more and more common ground. After a few drinks, May's laughter came more easily, her eyes sparkling with a light that drew him in. James felt a warmth spreading through him, a mix of the alcohol and the genuine connection he was feeling. May leaned in closer, her arm brushing against his. "You know, James, I'm really glad I decided to come here tonight." James smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. "Me too, May, me too." As the night grew later, the bar started to empty out, but James and May remained engrossed in their conversation. He had almost forgotten about Evelyn's absence, lost in the moment with May. She had a way of making him feel seen and appreciated, something he hadn't realized he had been missing. "Do you want to get out of here?" May suggested, her eyes glinting mischievously. James hesitated for a moment, a pang of guilt flickering through him. But the draw of May's company was too strong to resist. "Yeah, let's go." They left the Velvet Lounge, stepping into the cool night air. James felt a sense of anticipation building inside him as they walked to his car. He knew that tonight was going to change things, but at that moment he didn't care. He was captivated by May, and he wanted to see where this connection would lead. Chapter 2. The Invitation. "Would you like to continue this at my place?" James asked, emboldened by the alcohol and May's captivating presence. His heart pounded with a mix of excitement and nervousness. May hesitated for a moment, her green eyes searching his face for sincerity. Then she smiled and nodded. "Sure, why not?" James felt a surge of exhilaration. He quickly settled the tab and they made their way out of the velvet lounge. The night air was crisp and refreshing, a stark contrast to the warm, dimly lit bar they had just left. They walked towards his car, their footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. James opened the car door for May, who slid into the passenger seat with a graceful ease. He got in, started the engine, and they drove through the quiet streets of the city. The streetlights cast a soft glow on their faces, and the silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken anticipation. James' house was only a short drive away. He lived in a quaint two-story home in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. The driveway was lined with carefully trimmed hedges, and the porch light was left on, casting a warm, welcoming glow. He parked the car and turned to May, who was looking around, taking in the surroundings. "Nice place," she commented, as they walked up the path to the front door. "Thanks," James replied, unlocking the door and pushing it open. "Make yourself at home." Inside, the house was just as inviting. The living room was cozy with soft lighting from a few strategically placed lamps and the faint glow of a fireplace. The walls were adorned with a mix of modern art and family photos, giving the space a personal touch. Comfortable couches with plush cushions were arranged around a wooden coffee table, and a thick, soft rug covered the hardwood floor. James led May to the living room, where they settled on the couches. "Can I get you another drink?" he asked. "Sure," May said, smiling. "I'll have whatever you're having." James went to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, and returned to the living room. He poured them both a generous amount and handed a glass to May. They clinked glasses, a silent toast to the evening. They continued to talk, their conversation flowing easily as the wine loosened their tongues. The topics became more personal, as James found himself opening up to May in ways he hadn't with anyone else in a long time. He talked about his work, his dreams, and even shared some of his fears. May listened intently, her eyes never leaving his, creating an intimate connection between them. "Tell me more about you," James said, leaning back on the couch, feeling more relaxed than he had in weeks. May took a sip of her wine, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the room. "There's not much to tell," she said with a hint of modesty. "I moved to the city a few years ago. I work in marketing, but my real passion is art. I love painting and have a small studio where I spend most of my free time." James was intrigued. "I'd love to see your work sometime." "Maybe you will," May said with a playful smile, "if you play your cards right." James laughed, feeling a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the wine. He realized he really liked May, more than he had anticipated. There was something about her that was both captivating and comforting, a rare combination that he found irresistible. As the night wore on, they moved closer on the couch. Their conversation slowed, replaced by long, lingering glances and soft, hesitant touches. James could feel the tension building between them, an electric charge that made the air around them seem almost tangible. "May," he said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I'm really glad you came home with me tonight." May looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and desire. "Me too, James," she whispered. "Me too." Their faces inched closer, and James could feel her breath on his skin. The world outside seemed to disappear as he lost himself in her gaze. He knew what was about to happen, and he welcomed it, pushing aside any lingering thoughts of guilt or hesitation. Their lips met in a slow, tentative kiss that quickly deepened. James pulled her closer, his hands sliding down her back as she melted into him. The taste of wine lingered on their tongues, adding to the heady mix of sensations. They pulled apart for a moment, both breathing heavily, their eyes locked in a silent exchange. James' heart raced as he realized there was no turning back. He didn't want to. He wanted to explore this connection with May, to see where it would lead. "Let's go upstairs," May suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. James nodded, taking her hand and leading her up the staircase. The house was quiet, the only sound the soft creak of the wooden steps beneath their feet. They reached the bedroom, and James pushed the door open, revealing a large, inviting bed with crisp white sheets. They stood at the threshold for a moment, looking at each other with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. Then, without a word, they moved towards the bed, shedding their inhibitions along with their clothes. The room was filled with a soft, golden light from the bedside lamp, casting gentle shadows on the walls. As they lay down together, James felt a sense of inevitability. This night was a turning point, a moment that would change everything. He pushed the thought of Evelyn out of his mind, focusing entirely on May and the feelings she stirred within him. Their movements were slow and tender at first, exploring each other's bodies with a careful, deliberate touch. But as their passion grew, so did the intensity of their embrace. The room seemed to pulse with their shared desire, the outside world fading into insignificance. Hours later, as they lay entwined in each other's arms, James felt an unexpected sense of peace. He knew that the morning would bring complications and consequences, but for now he allowed himself to bask in the warmth of the moment, savoring the closeness he felt with May. "Thank you," he whispered, his lips brushing against her forehead. "For what?" May asked, her voice drowsy with contentment. "For being here. For tonight." May smiled, her eyes closing as she nestled closer to him. "You're welcome, James. Sweet dreams." James lay awake for a while, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with thoughts of what had just happened and what it meant for his future. But as he finally drifted off to sleep, one thought remained clear. He had found something special with May, and he was willing to see where it would lead, no matter the cost. Chapter 3. The Betrayal. May moved closer to James, her fingers lightly grazing his hand. The gentle touch sent a jolt through him, a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "You know, I really like you, James," May said softly, her eyes searching his for a sign of reciprocation. James felt a surge of emotions he hadn't experienced in a long time. He was torn between the deep connection he felt with May and the nagging guilt about Evelyn. But the alcohol and May's captivating presence dulled his sense of right and wrong. "I like you too, May," he replied, his voice barely a whisper. May leaned in, her lips hovering just inches from his. James hesitated for a fraction of a second, but the allure of her proximity and the magnetic pull of the moment overwhelmed any reservations he had. He closed the gap between them, their lips meeting in a slow, deliberate kiss. The kiss deepened, growing more urgent as they lost themselves in each other. May's hands slid up James's arms, pulling him closer, and he responded in kind, wrapping his arms around her waist. The world outside faded into oblivion. There was only May, the taste of her lips, the warmth of her body. One thing led to another, and they moved from the living room to the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions along the way. James knew it was wrong, a betrayal of the vows he had made to Evelyn, but in that moment he didn't care. He was completely absorbed in May, in the sensation of her skin against his, in the intoxicating rush of forbidden desire. The night passed in a blur of passion and abandon. They explored each other with a fervor that left them both breathless, their connection intensifying with every touch, every kiss. The room was filled with whispered words and soft gasps, the air thick with the scent of their shared intimacy. James felt a mixture of guilt and exhilaration as they lay entwined in the aftermath, their bodies tangled together on the bed. He had never expected to feel this way, to be so completely consumed by another person. The guilt gnawed at the edges of his mind, a reminder of the woman he had promised to love and honor. But the exhilaration of his connection with May was a powerful counterpoint, drowning out the whispers of his conscience. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the curtains, James drifted off to sleep next to May. His thoughts of Evelyn, her return, and the consequences of his actions were pushed to the back of his mind. In that fleeting moment, he allowed himself to forget everything but the warmth of May's presence and the peaceful oblivion of sleep. He awoke to the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Groggy and disoriented, it took him a moment to remember where he was and what had happened. Panic surged through him as he realized that Evelyn was back, likely hours earlier than expected. He turned to May, who was still asleep, her dark hair splayed across the pillow, looking serene and untroubled. James carefully extricated himself from the bed, trying not to wake May. His heart pounded in his chest as he hurriedly dressed, his mind racing with the implications of what he had done. He knew there was no way to undo the betrayal, no way to take back the night he had spent with May. The front door opened, and James heard the sound of Evelyn's footsteps in the hallway. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the inevitable confrontation. Evelyn's voice called out from the front of the house, her tone cheerful and unsuspecting. "James, I'm home!" The sound of her voice pierced through him, a painful reminder of his infidelity. He walked out of the bedroom, his heart heavy with dread and regret. Evelyn stood in the foyer, her suitcase beside her, a smile on her face that faded as she took in his disheveled appearance. "James, what's going on?" she asked, a note of concern creeping into her voice. Before he could answer, May emerged from the bedroom, still buttoning up her shirt. The sight of her in their home in his clothes was enough to shatter any illusion of innocence. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in fury as the truth became painfully clear. "Evelyn, James started, but she cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "Just don't." Evelyn turned to May, who stood frozen in place, her eyes wide with guilt and fear. "You need to leave," Evelyn said, her voice cold and firm. May nodded, quickly gathering her things and slipping out the door without another word. The silence that followed her departure was deafening, filled with unspoken accusations and the weight of James' betrayal. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry," James said, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "How could you, James?" Evelyn asked, tears welling up in her eyes. "How could you do this to us?" James had no answer, no excuse that could justify what he had done. He reached out to her, but she stepped back, a look of deep sorrow and betrayal on her face. "I need some time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think." She picked up her suitcase and turned towards the door. "Evelyn, please," James pleaded, his heart aching with the realization of what he had lost. She paused, her hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him one last time. "I'll let you know what I decide," she said, her voice filled with a steely resolve. Then she was gone, leaving James standing alone in the empty house, the echoes of his betrayal reverberating in the silence. He sank to the floor, his head in his hands, consumed by a grief that threatened to overwhelm him. He knew that he had made a terrible mistake, one that might cost him everything he held dear. As the weight of his actions settled over him, James realized that he had a long road ahead if he ever hoped to make amends. The path to redemption would be steep and fraught with challenges, but he was determined to try. For now, all he could do was face the consequences of his betrayal and hope that someday he might find a way to earn Evelyn's forgiveness. Chapter 4. The Discovery. Evelyn arrived home earlier than expected, her heart filled with anticipation. She had missed James terribly during her business trip and had decided to cut it short to surprise him. She parked her car in the driveway, noting the quiet stillness of the neighborhood. As she stepped out, the early morning light cast a soft glow on her surroundings, adding to her sense of excitement. Carrying her suitcase, Evelyn approached the front door, a smile playing on her lips. She unlocked it quietly, hoping to catch James still asleep so she could surprise him. As she entered the house, she was immediately struck by an unfamiliar scent of perfume. Her smile faltered, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The living room was in disarray. The usual neatness had given way to chaos. Empty wine glasses on the coffee table, a couple of discarded clothes on the floor, and a general sense of neglect. Her heart pounded as she took in the scene, her mind racing with possibilities. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She set her suitcase down and made her way towards the bedroom, her footsteps growing heavier with each step. As she neared the door, she could hear faint sounds coming from inside, soft breathing, the rustle of sheets. Her heart sank, a cold dread settling in her stomach. With a trembling hand, Evelyn pushed the bedroom door open. The sight that greeted her was a dagger to her heart. James and May were in bed together, their bodies intertwined in a scene of intimacy that shattered her world. For a moment, Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, her mind struggling to process the betrayal. A rush of emotions surged through her: anger, betrayal, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The man she had loved and trusted had shattered their vows, leaving her to pick up the pieces. "James!" she shouted, her voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. James woke up with a start, his eyes wide with shock and guilt as he saw Evelyn standing there. "Evelyn, he began, his voice choked with panic and regret. "Save it!" she snapped, her voice cold and cutting. The pain in her eyes was palpable, a mirror of the devastation she felt inside. "Get out, May!" May scrambled to gather her clothes, her face flushed with shame. She dressed quickly, avoiding Evelyn's piercing gaze. The room was tense with the unspoken accusations and the heavy weight of betrayal. May slipped past Evelyn, who stood rigidly at the door, her expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. As May hurried out of the house, Evelyn turned her full attention to James. The man who had once been the center of her world now seemed like a stranger, someone she barely recognized. The depth of his betrayal cut her to the core, leaving her feeling raw and exposed. "How could you, James?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How could you do this to us?" James sat up in bed, his head bowed in shame. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was weak, and I made a terrible mistake." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "A mistake?" she repeated, her voice filled with bitterness. "You call this a mistake? You destroyed everything we built together for what? A night of pleasure?" James reached out to her, but she stepped back, unable to bear his touch. "Please, Evelyn, let me explain," he pleaded, desperation in his voice. "There's nothing to explain," she said, her voice growing steadier. "You betrayed me, James. You betrayed us. I trusted you, and you shattered that trust." Evelyn turned away, unable to look at him any longer. The sight of him, the man she had loved and trusted, now filled her with a deep sense of revulsion. She walked out of the bedroom, her steps heavy with the weight of her broken heart. She returned to the living room, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She knew she couldn't stay there, not after what she had witnessed. She needed time to think, to process the enormity of what had happened. She grabbed her suitcase, the same one she had carried in with such joy only moments before, and began to pack her things. James followed her, his face etched with despair. "Evelyn, please," he begged. "Don't leave like this. We can work through this. I'll do anything to make it right." Evelyn stopped packing and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and pain. "You think we can just work through this?" she asked incredulously. "You think an apology is enough to fix what you've done?" James fell silent, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He knew there was no easy way to mend the rift he had caused, no simple words that could undo the hurt he had inflicted. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I need some time, James," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "I need to be alone to think about what I want, about what we had and what we've lost." She picked up her suitcase and walked towards the door, pausing for a moment to look back at him. "I'll let you know what I decide," she said, her voice filled with a steely resolve. Then she was gone, leaving James standing alone in the empty house, the echoes of their shattered relationship reverberating in the silence. He sank to the floor, his head in his hands, consumed by a grief that threatened to overwhelm him. As Evelyn drove away, the weight of what she had just witnessed pressed heavily on her heart. She knew that her life had been irrevocably changed, and the road ahead would be difficult. But for now, she needed to find a way to heal, to piece together the fragments of her broken heart and decide what her future would hold. Chapter 5. Evelyn's Resolve. Evelyn stood in the bedroom, her heart a storm of emotions. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The initial shock and pain of discovering James' betrayal had given way to a cold, determined anger. She knew that anger alone wouldn't solve anything. She needed a clear head to deal with this, to exact the revenge that was beginning to take shape in her mind. Ignoring James' desperate pleas for forgiveness, Evelyn methodically packed her things. She moved with a steely resolve, each item she placed in her suitcase a step further away from the life she had once known. James stood in the doorway, his face a mask of despair and regret. "Evelyn, please," he begged, his voice choked with emotion. "We can work this out. I'm so sorry." Evelyn paused for a moment, looking at him with eyes that no longer held the love and warmth they once did. "I need time," she said coldly, her voice devoid of any emotion. With that, she zipped up her suitcase and walked past him, leaving him standing there in the remnants of their shattered relationship. She drove to her friend Lisa's house, the only place she felt she could find some solace and clarity. Lisa welcomed her with open arms, offering her a place to stay and a sympathetic ear. As Evelyn settled into the guest room, her mind raced with thoughts of what had happened and what she needed to do next. That night, as she lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, a plan began to form in her mind. She replayed the events of the day over and over, her anger and pain fueling her determination. James had betrayed her in the worst possible way, and she was going to make sure he felt the same pain she did. Over the next few days, Evelyn focused on getting her life back in order. She took time off work, needing the space to think and to plan. She spent her days talking to Lisa, who offered her unwavering support and encouragement. They discussed what had happened, and Lisa, who had known James almost as long as Evelyn had, was just as furious. "He's a bastard," Lisa said one evening as they sat on the porch sipping tea. "He doesn't deserve you, Evelyn. You need to make him pay." Evelyn nodded, a fierce resolve hardening within her. "He will pay," she said quietly. "I'll make sure of it." Evelyn began to meticulously plan her revenge. She knew she couldn't act impulsively. She needed to be smart and calculating. She started by gathering information, learning as much as she could about James' life and his vulnerabilities. She spoke to mutual friends, keeping her inquiries casual, but storing every piece of useful information. She discovered that James' career was of utmost importance to him. He had worked hard to build a reputation in his field, and any scandal could ruin him. Evelyn decided that this would be her first target. She began collecting evidence of his infidelity, knowing that she could use it to tarnish his professional image. Evelyn also knew that May was a key part of her plan. She needed to ensure that Maya's involvement in the affair was not forgotten or overlooked. She began to subtly spread rumors, ensuring that Ma's name was associated with scandal and betrayal. She wanted May to feel the consequences of her actions just as much as James. As weeks turned into months, Evelyn's plan began to take shape. She documented everything meticulously, creating a dossier of evidence that would be impossible for James to refute. She consulted with a lawyer, ensuring that she had all the legal angles covered. She wanted to hit James where it hurt the most, and she wanted to do it in a way that was perfectly legal and undeniable. Throughout this process, Evelyn maintained her composure. She was polite and cordial in her interactions with James, giving him no indication of the storm that was brewing. James, for his part, was desperate to reconcile. He sent her flowers, wrote her letters, and left countless messages, all of which Evelyn ignored. She was focused on her plan, and nothing was going to distract her from her goal. Finally, the day came when Evelyn felt ready to execute her plan. She had everything she needed, the evidence, the legal backing, and the unwavering resolve to see it through. She knew that what she was about to do would change their lives forever, but she also knew it was the only way to make James truly understand the depth of his betrayal. Evelyn called James and asked him to meet her at a cafe they used to frequent. James, hopeful that this was a step towards reconciliation, agreed immediately. He arrived early, his heart pounding with anticipation and anxiety. Evelyn arrived a few minutes later, looking composed and confident. She greeted him with a polite smile and sat down across from him. James noticed the calm determination in her eyes, a stark contrast to the turmoil he felt inside. "Evelyn, thank you for agreeing to meet," James began, his voice filled with hope. "I've missed you so much, and I want to make things right." Evelyn nodded, her expression unreadable. "James, I've given this a lot of thought," she said, her voice steady. "And I've come to a decision." James' heart skipped a beat. He leaned forward, desperate to hear what she had to say. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn took a deep breath and handed him a thick envelope. "This is everything you need to know," she said. "It's the evidence of your betrayal and the steps I've taken to ensure you face the consequences." James' hands trembled as he opened the envelope and began to read. The color drained from his face as he realized the extent of Evelyn's meticulous planning. She had covered every angle, leaving him with no way to refute the evidence or escape the repercussions. "Evelyn, please," he begged, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. "Don't do this. I can change. I can make it right." Evelyn shook her head, her resolve unwavering. "It's too late for that, James," she said. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences." With that, she stood up and walked away, leaving James sitting alone in the cafe, his world crumbling around him. As she stepped outside, Evelyn felt a sense of liberation. She had taken control of her life and her destiny, and she knew that she was strong enough to move forward. As she walked away from the cafe, Evelyn felt the first stirrings of hope. She had faced the betrayal head-on and had emerged stronger for it. She knew that the road ahead would still be difficult, but she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. She had discovered a strength within herself that she never knew existed, and with it, she was determined to rebuild her life on her own terms. Part 2. The Fallout. Chapter 6. Evelyn's Pain and Isolation. Evelyn settled into her friend Lisa's guest room, the initial shock of the betrayal slowly morphing into a deep, simmering anger. The guest room was cozy and inviting, but it felt alien to Evelyn, a stark contrast to the home she had shared with James. She spent her days at work, trying to maintain her composure, focusing on her tasks with a ferocious intensity to keep her mind off the heartbreak. The nights, however, were a different story. Alone in the darkness, Evelyn's thoughts would drift to memories of her marriage, each one a painful reminder of what she had lost. Flashbacks of happier times with James haunted her. She remembered their wedding day, the joy in James' eyes as they exchanged vows, the laughter they shared with family and friends, their vacations together, exploring new places and creating shared memories, the quiet evenings spent together, curled up on the couch with a bottle of wine, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. Each memory was a knife to her heart, but it also fueled her determination to make him understand the depth of his betrayal. Evelyn's evenings were a mix of sorrow and resolve. She would often sit by the window, staring out into the night, clutching a photo of their wedding day. Tears would stream down her face as she recalled the promises they made to each other. She kept a journal where she poured out her feelings, detailing every moment of pain, every thought of revenge, and every plan she was formulating. This process, though excruciating, gave her a sense of control and purpose. Lisa was a constant source of support, offering a listening ear and words of comfort. "You're stronger than you know," she would say, holding Evelyn's hand. "You'll get through this." Despite the support, Evelyn often felt isolated. She distanced herself from other friends and family, not ready to face their pity or questions. She needed this time to herself, to process the betrayal and to plan her next steps. She immersed herself in work during the day, finding solace in the structure and routine it provided. Her colleagues noticed a change in her. She was more focused, more driven, but also more detached. They attributed it to her ambition, unaware of the storm brewing inside her. Chapter 7. James' Regret. James, left alone in their once shared home, was consumed by regret. The reality of his actions hit him hard as he woke up each morning to an empty bed, the silence of the house a constant reminder of what he had lost. The perfume May had left behind still lingered, a bitter reminder of his betrayal. He tried to reach out to Evelyn, sending flowers to her office with heartfelt notes, writing long letters apologizing for his actions and leaving countless voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. But Evelyn remained unresponsive. Each day without a response felt like an eternity, amplifying his guilt and regret. James began to realize just how much he had taken Evelyn for granted. The small things, her laugh, her presence, the comfort of knowing she was there, became glaring absences in his life. He replayed the night of his betrayal over and over in his mind, cursing himself for his weakness. He couldn't believe he had thrown away their life together for a fleeting moment of passion. At work, James struggled to focus. His mind constantly drifted back to Evelyn and the mistakes he had made. His colleagues noticed his distraction, and his performance began to suffer. He isolated himself, avoiding social interactions and spending most of his time in his office, lost in thoughts of what could have been. He began to drink more heavily, trying to drown out the overwhelming sense of loss and guilt that consumed him. Chapter 8. Evelyn's Plan. Evelyn, meanwhile, was meticulously planning her revenge. She knew that she needed to make James feel the same pain she had experienced. Her plan was not just about retribution, it was about reclaiming her power and showing James that she was not someone to be trifled with. She began to strategize, considering different ways to get back at him. Consulting with close friends and a therapist, she kept her emotions in check and focused on her goal. She started by improving herself. Evelyn joined a gym, attending classes regularly to channel her anger and frustration into something positive. She pushed herself hard, finding strength in her physical transformation. Each drop of sweat was a release, each completed workout a step closer to regaining her confidence. She also decided to change her appearance. She got a new haircut, opting for a style that made her feel bold and empowered. She updated her wardrobe, choosing clothes that made her feel confident and beautiful. These changes were not just about appearances, they were about reclaiming her identity and showing James and herself that she was not defined by his betrayal. Evelyn began to socialize more, reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. She attended events, joined clubs, and engaged in activities she had always wanted to try. She wanted to show James what he had lost and make him regret his actions even more. Her transformation was not just physical but emotional as well. She was determined to emerge from this experience stronger and more resilient. Part of her plan involved gathering evidence of James' infidelity and ensuring it was known to the right people. She discreetly documented everything, from the night of the betrayal to James' subsequent attempts to contact her. She was meticulous in her approach, knowing that she needed irrefutable proof to make her case. Evelyn also began to explore legal avenues, consulting with a lawyer to understand her rights and options. She wanted to ensure that when she made her move, it would be swift and devastating, leaving no room for James to retaliate. She planned every step carefully, thinking through every possible outcome and preparing for each one. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Evelyn's resolve only grew stronger. She could see the changes in herself. She was more confident, more determined, and more in control of her life. The pain of the betrayal still lingered, but it was now a source of strength rather than weakness. She knew that she was ready to face whatever came next, and she was determined to make James pay for his betrayal in a way he would never forget. Chapter 9. James' Attempts at Reconciliation. James was drowning in regret. Each day without Evelyn felt like an eternity, and he became more desperate to make amends. He began by sending more flowers, each bouquet larger and more extravagant than the last. He chose her favorite flowers, lilies and roses, hoping they would remind her of the good times they shared. Each arrangement came with a heartfelt note, but Evelyn remained unmoved. "Please forgive me," one note read. "I miss you more than words can express. I will do anything to make this right." James left voicemails, pouring his heart out, apologizing repeatedly, and begging for another chance. "Evelyn, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can we just talk? I love you so much. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He even tried to visit her at her workplace, hoping to catch her in a moment where she might be more receptive. One afternoon, he showed up with a bouquet in hand, his eyes pleading. Evelyn saw him from her office window and instructed the receptionist to send him away. She couldn't face him yet. Her wounds were still too raw. Her continued silence drove James to the brink of despair. He was losing sleep, spending his nights tossing and turning, tormented by the memories of what he had done. The once confident and composed man was now a shell of his former self. He became increasingly isolated, withdrawing from social interactions and spending most of his time alone in their empty house. James' friends noticed the change in him. They tried to reach out, inviting him to social gatherings or simply to talk, but he declined their offers. He couldn't bring himself to explain the real reason behind his deteriorating state. The shame and guilt were too much to bear. At work, James was a mess. He struggled to focus on his tasks, his mind constantly drifting back to Evelyn and the catastrophic mistake he had made. His colleagues noticed his declining performance, and whispers about his behavior started circulating in the office. One day, his boss called him into the office. "James, we've noticed a significant drop in your performance lately. Is everything all right?" the boss asked, concern etched on his face. James, unable to share the truth, muttered a vague response about personal issues. "I'm dealing with some things at home, but I promise I'll get back on track." His boss gave him a warning, urging him to seek help if needed and to focus on his work. But James couldn't concentrate on anything other than getting Evelyn back. His mental state continued to deteriorate as he obsessed over her and her new life. Chapter 10. Evelyn's Transformation. While James was unraveling, Evelyn was undergoing a profound transformation. She poured her energy into self-improvement, determined not to let James' betrayal define her. She joined a gym, attending classes regularly and pushing herself harder with each session. The physical exertion was a release, a way to channel her anger and frustration into something positive. Evelyn also decided to change her appearance. She got a chic new haircut, opting for a style that made her feel bold and empowered. She updated her wardrobe, choosing clothes that accentuated her confidence and beauty. Each change was a step toward reclaiming her identity, showing herself and the world that she was not a victim of James' betrayal. Her newfound confidence radiated, drawing people to her. She started socializing more, attending events, and reconnecting with old friends. She joined clubs and groups, engaging in activities she had always wanted to try but never had the chance. Evelyn found herself laughing more, enjoying the company of new acquaintances and rekindling old friendships. As she embraced her independence, Evelyn attracted attention from men. She enjoyed the compliments and flirtations, feeling desired and appreciated in ways she hadn't felt in years. It was a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt during the final months of her marriage. Evelyn was not content to keep her transformation to herself. She made sure that James found out about her new life. She posted pictures on social media, showing her at parties, smiling and enjoying herself. Each photo was a carefully curated message to James. "Look at what you lost. See how well I'm doing without you." The photos were filled with vibrant colors and lively settings, Evelyn laughing with friends at a rooftop bar, hiking through picturesque landscapes, attending elegant soirees in stunning dresses. Her posts were accompanied by upbeat captions, emphasizing her happiness and newfound freedom. Part 3. The Revenge. Chapter 11. James' Desperation. James saw the pictures of Evelyn's new life and felt a pang of jealousy and regret. He couldn't believe how quickly she had moved on, while he was still struggling to cope with the consequences of his actions. Each photo was a reminder of what he had thrown away. His desperation to win her back intensified with each passing day. Unable to bear the thought of losing Evelyn forever, James became increasingly erratic. His attempts to reach out to her became more frequent and frantic. He sent long, emotional emails, pleading for forgiveness and promising to change. He even showed up at places she frequented, hoping to catch her attention, but she always managed to avoid him. At work, James was a mess. His performance continued to decline, and he made several critical mistakes that cost the company significant clients. His boss, who had been patient up until now, called him in for a final warning. "James, I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but it's affecting your work. If you don't get it together, we may have to take more serious action," his boss said sternly. James nodded, barely registering the words. His mind was consumed by thoughts of Evelyn. He couldn't focus on anything other than his desperation to make things right with her. His mental state continued to deteriorate, and he began to lose weight, his once sharp appearance now gaunt and haggard. James' obsession with Evelyn and her new life reached a breaking point. He couldn't stand the idea of her being happy without him, of her moving on and finding happiness elsewhere. The jealousy and regret gnawed at him, driving him to the brink of madness. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, James sat alone in their empty house, staring at a photo of Evelyn on his phone. It was a recent picture, one she had posted on social media. She was smiling, surrounded by friends, looking more beautiful and vibrant than ever. The sight of her happiness without him was too much to bear. Fueled by a mix of alcohol and desperation, James picked up his phone and dialed her number, not caring about the late hour. The phone rang several times before going to voicemail. He left a long, rambling message, his voice slurred and filled with emotion. "Evelyn, please, I need to talk to you. I can't do this without you. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please, just give me another chance. I love you." As he hung up, James felt a crushing sense of hopelessness. He knew he was losing her, and he didn't know how to stop it. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, and for the first time, he truly understood the depth of his mistake. Evelyn had been the best thing in his life, and he had thrown it all away for a moment of weakness. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, and James knew that the road to redemption, if it existed at all, would be long and arduous. He was willing to do whatever it took to win Evelyn back. But as he looked at the photo on his phone, he couldn't shake the feeling that it might already be too late. Chapter 12. Evelyn's New Relationships. Evelyn embraced her new life with a mix of enthusiasm and self-assuredness. She started dating casually, savoring her newfound freedom and the attention it brought her. Her first few dates were with charming individuals who admired her vibrant personality and the confidence she radiated. They ranged from laid-back dinners to adventurous outings, each one a testament to her rediscovered zest for life. One evening, Evelyn met Alex at a lively downtown bar. They connected instantly over shared interests in music and travel. Their date included dinner at a trendy bistro, followed by drinks at a rooftop lounge with stunning city views. Alex was attentive and genuinely interested, making Evelyn feel desired and appreciated. The night ended with a warm embrace and a promise to see each other again, which Evelyn found both exhilarating and empowering. During another date with Marcus, a successful entrepreneur, Evelyn enjoyed a night at an exclusive charity event. Marcus was sophisticated and charming, and their conversation flowed effortlessly. They danced under the stars and shared intimate moments, which made Evelyn feel valued and cherished. She reveled in the compliments he lavished on her, relishing the attention and validation. Evelyn made sure that James was aware of her new relationships. She posted pictures on social media capturing moments from her dates, her radiant smile, the luxurious settings, and the happy, carefree moments. She tagged her dates in posts using hashtags like #LivingMyBestLife and #MovingOn. Each post was carefully crafted to convey her independence and joy, and she knew that James would see them. Through mutual friends, Evelyn also made it known that she was dating. She casually mentioned her new romantic interests in conversations, letting it slip that she was seeing someone new. Her friends, who had been supportive throughout her ordeal, were more than willing to share this news with James, either out of sympathy for Evelyn or as a form of social justice. The attention and admiration she received from her new partners contrasted sharply with the void she had felt in her previous relationship. Evelyn wasn't necessarily looking for a serious commitment. Instead, she relished the opportunity to feel desired and to reclaim her power and independence. The thrill of new romantic possibilities was liberating and gave her a renewed sense of self-worth. Her dating life became a statement of her resilience and empowerment. She used it as a way to demonstrate to James and to herself that she was not defined by his betrayal. The casual relationships were part of her healing process, a way to move forward and rebuild her confidence. Chapter 13. James' Downfall. As Evelyn flourished, James' professional and personal life began to unravel further. His mistakes at work became more frequent and more costly. He struggled with deadlines, missed important meetings, and his projects suffered due to his lack of focus. His colleagues noticed his diminishing performance, and the office atmosphere became tense as they tried to cover for his errors. One day, James was called into a meeting with his boss. The office was somber, the weight of the conversation palpable. His boss, Mr. Thompson, sat behind his desk with a serious expression. "James, we need to talk about your recent performance," Mr. Thompson began, his tone firm. There have been multiple issues with your work, and it's affecting the team and our clients. James, looking disheveled and exhausted, tried to defend himself, but his explanations fell flat. I know I've been falling behind. I've been dealing with some personal issues, he said, his voice lacking conviction. Mr. Thompson sighed. I understand that personal issues can be challenging, but we need results. I'm giving you an ultimatum. Improve your performance within the next 30 days or face termination. The words were a heavy blow, and James felt a deep sense of despair. He realized that his professional life was now at risk, and the pressure only added to his sense of isolation and helplessness. The realization that he had lost Evelyn for good was sinking in, and he could not escape the truth that he was the one to blame for his current predicament. James tried to pull himself together, but his efforts were in vain. He became more withdrawn, avoiding social interactions and working late into the night in a desperate attempt to salvage his job. But his performance continued to deteriorate, and his mental state worsened. The guilt and regret over his actions consumed him. He began to neglect his health, skipping meals and losing sleep. His once sharp appearance grew haggard, and his colleagues' pitying glances only deepened his sense of shame. James' personal life mirrored his professional downfall. The isolation he felt was profound, with his friends growing distant and his support network dwindling. He was alone with his thoughts, which were increasingly dominated by the realization that he had thrown away his chance at happiness. Part 4. The Resolution. Chapter 14. The Confrontation. After months of pain, both James and Evelyn reached a point where a confrontation seemed inevitable. The time had come for them to face each other, to confront the wounds that had been inflicted, and to seek some form of closure. Evelyn agreed to meet James in a neutral location, a quiet cafe with a serene atmosphere. It was an appropriate setting for a serious discussion, away from the charged emotions of their past home. When Evelyn arrived, she was composed, her appearance a testament to her strength and self-assurance. James, on the other hand, looked worn and defeated, a stark contrast to the man he once was. As they sat across from each other, the tension was palpable. James began, his voice strained. Evelyn, thank you for meeting me. I know I don't deserve this, but I needed to see you. I want to apologize again for everything. Evelyn's eyes were steady, her voice calm but firm. James, you broke my heart. You took everything we had and threw it away for a fleeting moment of pleasure. Do you have any idea how much that hurt? James nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I know, Evelyn. I know I made a terrible mistake. I've been trying to make things right, but I realize now that I've lost you. I'm so sorry. Evelyn took a deep breath, her emotions under control, but her pain evident in her eyes. You hurt me in a way that's hard to describe. I felt betrayed and discarded. I needed you to be honest and loyal, and you weren't. James reached out, his hand trembling. Please, Evelyn, I'm asking for another chance. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to prove myself. I'll change, I promise. Evelyn pulled back, her expression resolute. James, I've moved on. I'm finding happiness and strength in myself that I never knew I had. I can't go back to a place where I was hurt and disrespected. The conversation continued, with James pleading and Evelyn articulating her hurt. The meeting was a mixture of unresolved emotions and painful truths. For James, it was a final acknowledgement of his mistakes, a confrontation with the consequences of his actions. For Evelyn, it was a moment of closure, a reaffirmation of her strength and independence. As they parted ways, both felt the weight of their past, but also the clarity of their futures. James was left with the stark reality of his choices, while Evelyn moved forward with a renewed sense of purpose and self-worth. Chapter 15. Evelyn's Decision. Evelyn sat alone in her friend's cozy living room, the soft light from a lamp casting gentle shadows across the room. The betrayal was still fresh in her mind, but she had grown a lot since that painful moment. She had taken time to reflect, heal, and rediscover herself. Now, as she considered her options, she knew that her decision would shape her future. The weight of her choice was heavy. She had spent countless hours pondering whether to give James another chance. Her heart was torn between the pain of his betrayal and the possibility of rebuilding what they once had. She knew that forgiving James was not just about absolving him, but about finding peace for herself. Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed James' number. The call felt monumental, marking a shift from anger and hurt to the potential of a new beginning. When James answered, his voice was filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she replied, her tone measured but firm. "I've made my decision. I'm willing to give you another chance, but it's going to be on my terms." James' heart raced, his mind grappling with the weight of her words. "What are your terms?" he asked, trying to keep his emotions in check. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of resolve and vulnerability. "We need to attend counseling together. We'll work on rebuilding our relationship from the ground up. But understand this, things will never be the same. Rebuilding trust takes time and effort from both of us." James was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes, Evelyn. I want to prove to you that I can change. I love you and I'm ready to work on this." As Evelyn ended the call, she felt a sense of cautious optimism. She knew that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or erasing the past. It meant facing the pain, acknowledging it, and working together to build something new. Her decision was not just about James, but about her own healing and future. Chapter 16. The Aftermath. The aftermath of Evelyn's decision was a complex blend of challenge and reward. The counseling sessions began with both of them feeling vulnerable and raw. Their therapist, a compassionate and insightful professional, guided them through the process of rebuilding their relationship. The sessions were intense, requiring both Evelyn and James to confront their past mistakes and communicate openly about their feelings. James worked tirelessly to regain Evelyn's trust. He was diligent in attending therapy, participating actively in sessions, and making a genuine effort to change his behavior. He learned about the importance of transparency, accountability, and consistent actions. Each small step he took towards regaining Evelyn's trust was a testament to his commitment to their relationship. For Evelyn, the process was both painful and cathartic. She had to confront her own vulnerabilities and fears, sharing her feelings of betrayal and disappointment. It was difficult to open up again, but she found that expressing her emotions in a safe space helped her heal. She gradually allowed herself to be vulnerable with James, a crucial step in rebuilding their connection. Their journey through counseling was marked by moments of breakthrough and setbacks. They experienced arguments and disagreements, but they also shared moments of deep understanding and renewed affection. The process was a roller coaster, but it also brought them closer together in ways they had not experienced before. As they reflected on their ordeal, Evelyn and James began to recognize the lessons they had learned. They realized that their love had been tested in extreme ways but had emerged stronger. They had faced their demons, acknowledged their mistakes, and worked together to overcome them. The process was far from easy, but it was ultimately rewarding. They celebrated small victories, such as open communication and mutual support, and worked through their challenges with patience and determination. The healing was gradual, but each step forward was a testament to their commitment to each other. Chapter 17. Conclusion. In the end, James and Evelyn found a new kind of love, one built on honesty, forgiveness, and mutual respect. Their relationship was no longer the same as it had been before the betrayal, but it had evolved into something deeper and more resilient. They understood that their journey together had transformed them both, making their bond stronger and more meaningful. One serene evening, James and Evelyn sat together on their porch. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow across the landscape. The quietude of the moment was a stark contrast to the tumultuous period they had endured. They held hands, their fingers entwined, a symbol of their renewed connection. As they watched the sunset, Evelyn reflected on their journey. Despite the pain and heartache they had experienced, they had found a way to move forward. The sunset was a metaphor for their new beginning, a blend of past struggles and the promise of a brighter future. James, looking at Evelyn with gratitude and love, spoke softly. "Thank you for giving us another chance. I know I have a lot to prove, but I'm committed to making this work." Evelyn smiled, her heart full of hope. I believe in us, James. We've come through so much, and I'm excited for what lies ahead. Our love has been tested, but we've found a way to grow and heal together. The story concluded with a reflection on love, betrayal, and the strength to overcome adversity. James and Evelyn's journey had been fraught with challenges, but their commitment to each other and their willingness to confront their past had paved the way for a new chapter. Their love had endured the toughest trials, proving that true love could withstand even the most profound challenges.